This is God.
Widows, balls and ghouls, how are we all doing? Today, I'm going to be ranking A Nightmare on Elm Street, the franchise. All 9 movies, including Freddy vs. Jason and A New Nightmare, because A New Nightmare technically isn't a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So a little brief history of A Nightmare on Elm Street. A Nightmare on Elm Street is a slasher horror movie franchise, and the franchise was originally created and directed by Wes Craven in 1984. It was never meant to be a franchise, it was meant to be a one and done. The look of Freddy came from something that Robert Englund saw out of a window when he was a kid. There was like this homeless guy that was kind of messing with him, and he wore a fedora and a long trench coat, and Wes Craven could only see his eyes. It terrified Wes as a kid. So that's where the look came from. The name Freddy Krueger actually came from Wes Craven's high school bully. So there's already off to an evil start there. Then Wes Craven read an article somewhere in Asia. A teenager was having nightmares, and he was so scared of sleeping, he was like using coffee pots and stuff that were hidden from his parents. He was convinced he was going to die in his sleep, and he actually died in his sleep. And that is where Freddy Krueger was born, out of the imagination of Wes Craven, and that is why he is called the Master of Horror. And Craven has dipped in and out of the franchise. He wasn't involved in part 2, but he was involved in part 3, and then he stepped away until New Nightmare. And in New Nightmare, he looked at all the other films and was like, let's just get rid of all of them and do something completely different. Brought out a meta movie, which is kind of the building blocks for the Scream franchise. And then he was gone again. He had nothing to do with Freddy vs. Jason or the remake. Now, apart from the remake, Robert Englund plays Freddy Krueger throughout the series. There's very different looks throughout the series. Some fantastic, some not so good, but we'll get into that. But the basic premise is Freddy Krueger was a child murderer while he was alive, and the parents of Springwood, where Elm Street is located, took vigilante justice into their own hands, and they killed one Freddy Krueger by burning him alive for killing kids. Yep, this is dark. And somehow Freddy Krueger can come back through the dreams of the children of the people that killed him. And sometimes this franchise is an absolute blast. And there's other times I just can't watch the movies. So last and certainly least, by a country mile, is Freddys Dead, the final nightmare. I hate this movie. I do not like the look of Freddy Krueger. I do not like the way they used Freddy Krueger as some sort of cartoon villain. In fact, this is described as the Looney Tunes Fred Krueger. Freddy reenacts a scene from The Wizard of Oz where he's cackling, riding a broomstick, wearing a witch's hat. I'll get you, my pretties, and
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul too.
Even as a kid that was terrified of Fred Krueger, this movie didn't scare me. He looked ridiculous. The kills were meh. So in this we get 3 different versions of Mr. Krueger. We get Robert Englund as Addy Fred Krueger. We get Jason Schirmer, I hope I'm saying that right, as the young Fred Krueger. And we get Toby Sexton as a teenage Freddy Krueger. The teenage Freddy Krueger element of this is quite good. They do a backstory to Freddy, which kind of not needed. We already know everything we need to know. But yeah, he's the son of 1,000 maniacs, and Alice Cooper turns up in this as Fred Krueger's dad, and he's a violent man, and Freddy, the character, sort of embraces the pain of being beaten by his dad and turns it into something that he enjoys and doesn't fear anymore. That was a good thing. Kind of the only good thing. This film was fucking weird. It looks weird. It doesn't play out very well. For some reason, Tom Arnold and Roseanne Barr turn up in here. There's no kids in Springwood. If you look very, very closely, you will see that there is actually a Johnny Depp cameo in this. But for me, this movie is just forgettable. The fact that Freddy doesn't look scary just ruins it for me, so I'm not going to spend much time on this. I don't like the cast. don't particularly like anything outside of some of the backstory of Fred. The 3D elements look trash. 3D has always looked trash. Even when it was redone in the early 2000s, you know, you didn't have to wear the 2 different colour lens glass. It's never, ever looked good for me. And despite this movie being critically panned, hated by fans, it's the 3rd highest grossing movie of the franchise. Probably because they said they were going to kill off Freddy. He dies in every movie. We get Freddy as a bus driver, we get parachute scenes, and I would go with the plot, but I don't like it. I can barely remember it, and I can't rewatch it, so yeah, last place, by far, Freddys Dead. I know there are some people out there that actually like this movie for the comedic elements. I ain't one of them. Next up is A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. I don't like this one either. I actually tried to rewatch the entire franchise in the build-up to this video, especially over Halloween, and I turned this one off 20-30 minutes in. Just, no, not for me. Freddy is starting to look more like Robert Englund than Fred Krueger in this. It's the start of the bubblegum thing. In this movie, we get the returning characters of Alice and Dan. Alice has a dream where she is Amanda Krueger and the son of 1,000 maniacs and all of that stuff. Englund actually plays one of the maniacs, so we can guess which sperm got through there. And it shows that Amanda was locked in the asylum, left to these 1,000 maniacs, and bad stuff took place. And I'm sure the 1,000 maniacs thing was brought up in part 3 when I think about it, but they actually show it in this. It's okay. But then Dan wakes up Alice, and that's where I turned the movie off, so I struggle to remember the rest. But we've got Greta, Mark, and Yvonne in this. Alice goes to work, somehow gets sidetracked into going to the asylum. I think she sees Freddy's mum. Then there's this horrific birth scene where Freddy Krueger is reborn into the world, and it looks awful. And I think the premise was Alice shows fear and screams, and that gives Freddy the power to come back or the power to grow into a fully grown adult. Yeah, this film sucks. Now, there is some aspects of this film that are far better than the sequel. That would be Dan's death. Dan, to rescue Alice, jumps on his motorcycle, but he's obviously fallen asleep, and Freddy and the motorcycle become one entity, and then it takes over Dan. I have seen different cuts of this where it was far more gruesome, and it looked fantastic, but the MPA got involved and took most of the cool elements of this movie out, and you know, they ruined the Friday the 13th franchise as well as the Nightmare franchise with their ridiculous overreaction to a bit of gore. Freddy does his thing, kills everyone, but the other kills in this movie. There's this Super Freddy. Just didn't work for me. Obviously, one of them's a comic book lover, a comic book artist, so he goes into his comic book, and the effect of him going into the comic book would have been really cool if our hard take on me hadn't have done it prior. And then you just see people get shredded by Super Shreddy, who is Freddy on steroids. It sucked. And then somehow Freddy is turned into a child, and the child actor, I don't want to slate child actors, but it's not very good. He tries as a child using his child voice to emulate Freddy's voice, and it just doesn't work at all. And it's also worth questioning that the fetus can understand English and seems to be about as intelligent as a 10-year-old. What? Lisa Wilcox is good in this, but the rest of the movie is just so forgettable. And then there's the power glove. Yeah, the movie's just a bit of a mess. The story's all over the place. I like the idea behind it, Freddy coming into the world. Freddy has already been defeated a number of times, so he tries something different and attaches himself to an unborn baby. But beyond the idea, this movie just isn't that great at all. There's one good kill. And this is how boring this movie is. I don't remember most of the kills in this. Are there that many kills in this? I don't know. I don't care. The movie sucked. Next up is 2010's A Nightmare on Elm Street, a remake. Ooh. Jackie Earle Haley, cast as Freddy Krueger. Ooh. Count me in. I think he's a fantastic actor. He's got the voice. He does creepy very well. I remember him as Rorschach in Watchmen. Exciting times. This was a Michael Bay movie, and shoot me if you want. I enjoyed the Texas Chainsaw remake. I also enjoyed the Friday the 13th remake. When I rank the Friday the 13th movies, some people are going to be pissed at me. But yeah, they remake the movie with a fantastic cast. Now, I'm going to read out the cast to you here. Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy Krueger. Kyle Gallner as Quentin Smith. I know, for some reason, they changed Glenn and all of the others' names, even though they're clearly the same characters. It makes no sense. They even changed Nancy's name. But, into the cast. Kyle Gallner, in loads of horror movies. Actually a very good actor. Very good at portraying emotion. He looks bored out of his mind in this. Rooney Mara, who's had Oscar nods, playing Nancy Holbrook. Why have we changed Nancy's... Okay, we'll try not to judge. Somebody that was given an Oscar nod... She was nodding off all the way through this film. Puns intended. She looked half asleep like she didn't care, and in later interviews pretty much said she didn't care, she didn't want to make it. Then don't make it. Katie Cassidy as Chris, who's Tina really. I used to watch Arrow, and her acting, Katie Cassidy's acting in Arrow wasn't the greatest. In this, she's decent. But there's no shock value because you know she's playing Tina and she's going to get Tina's death, which doesn't look anywhere near as good as the original. Nothing in this film looks as good as the original, but still in with the cast. We get Connie Britton in this movie from American Horror Story, somebody that can really act well. We get Clancy Brown, the only saving grace of Pet Sematary 2. The fucking Kurgan is in this movie, and just none of it. None of it works. They recreate a lot of scenes from the original movie. For example, Freddy coming out above the bed, a very iconic scene. It looks cheap, nasty and horrible. It's CGI. It takes you out of the movie. They create Nancy's feet getting stuck in the floor. It looks rubbish. Freddy Krueger himself doesn't look great in this. You have the fantastic actor Jackie Earle Haley playing this role, and I was excited, and then you can't see anything of his acting in this because they make him look like a real burn victim. And in doing so, you take away his eyes and his mouth. There's barely any movement in his face. There's like a CGI patch on the side so you can see his teeth, but what's the point when the rest of him is no good? This movie makes some decisions. One of the decisions is a red herring, and I wish this red herring had actually been the different story. And that red herring is that Freddy Krueger was actually innocent. He never did anything to those kids, and he was burned alive for nothing. Ooh, that's exciting. That's something new. I can sympathise with Freddy now because he was an innocent man that is coming back for revenge. Go on, Freddy, kill them all. And not long after, they backtrack on that, and yeah, Freddy's a nonce. You turned a 80s slasher horror icon, a 90s slasher horror icon, into a paedophile. Other movies have hinted at it, but it's never blatantly outright, yep, that's right. Mr. Krueger in his stripy jumper, pork kids. Oh, why? Why? There is nothing likeable about Freddy now. Nobody is going to enjoy this movie. And you're right. Nobody enjoyed this movie. I don't like this movie. It's got the green and red lighting through there. There's some elements that look nice until the CGI steps in, and then you're like, ugh. There's a scene where the kid's hung upside down. Freddy cuts him open. He's like, your body's dead, but your brain can live for 6 minutes. I was like, that's cool. They introduced this thing with micro naps. Now, being somebody that used to work night shifts and used to stay up all day to, have a life, I've had micro naps. I've had these weird dreams where I was stood up in work one night and like, I've got to go to sleep. It was a really cool idea until I rewatched this time and I'm like, anybody remember this scene from the original movie? Anybody remember it? It's like, Nancy was awake. How did Freddy's tongue come through the phone and It was a micro nap. So this movie is kind of one of the things that's added to it that add excitement that's already been done. I went to the cinema to watch this movie and I was thoroughly disappointed. I walked out of there like, that was boring. It's better than the last two, but not by a lot. I don't understand how they could take such a successful idea, such a brilliant cast, and screw it all up. I really don't. I can rewatch this on occasion, maybe, but I won't go out of my way to watch it. It wasn't that great. I have no desire to rewatch it either, because it just does a dirty on Freddy. There's some cool elements to it, but the odd cool element all the way through a film doesn't make a good movie. There's a scene in a pharmacy with stuff flying off a shelf with Freddy's bleeding through because of the micro naps. That's pretty cool. It looks like an expensive film, but the CGI doesn't land, so no, I just don't like it. Next up is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master. Now, this used to be further down my list. I preferred the remake to this for a long time, but on this recent rewatch, I kind of like this one now. There's some good ideas in there. Freddy is far too comedic in this, but there are dark elements. What I don't like about this is they take the surviving characters from Part 3, Kristen, Joey, and Kincaid. Great characters. They're all back at school, but Kristen's face has changed, as has her personality. In fact, I don't think the first twice I watched this, I realised that this was supposed to be Patricia Arquette's character, Kristen. I just didn't understand it. Joey, which is a great character, and Kincaid. And they off them in the beginning of the film. And it's like, why have them survive if you're just going to off them in the opening of the next film? And they do this a few times in the franchise, and it kind of sucks. Freddy in this is... the makeup's pretty cool. It's not quite gone as far as it does later on. It's not quite bubblegum, but it's kind of a blend of parts 1 and 3. And it's kind of cool. And then we see Kristen dreaming. She's a kid outside, drawn on chalk. She's clearly dreaming. Then she's on a beach, and there's a Jaws Freddy glove hybrid. It changes to a proper glove when it hits the sand. Freddy puts on some 80s style glasses, puts his foot on her head. She falls through the sand. You think she's about to die because it's like quicksand, but she drops into 1428 Elm Street, Nancy's house. Don't show Freddy in the full daylight. It's just not scary. The shark thing with the hand. I remember watching the trailer for this as a kid on some other VHS I was watching, and at this point I was still terrified of Fred Krueger, and I'm watching the advert like, this is stupid. At the end of part 3, Freddy is defeated in part by Nancy and the Dream Warriors, and Nancy's dad, played by John Saxon. Freddy's bones are buried in the ground at the junkyard with holy water. That's how they help kill Freddy, and a dog pisses on Freddy's grave. Fire comes out while the dog pisses. Freddy comes back to life. Why did Freddy come back from dog piss? Did it contaminate the holy water? There's a good idea. They drop a car on Kincaid and kill him. Pointless death. Kincaid, who was very strong in part 3, who held his own against Freddy, in this is a fucking moron. He just stands there. The dog runs away. The dog's smarter than Kincaid. Kincaid gets killed. Then Joey dies. Joey's death is actually pretty cool. He's on a waterbed. He sees a naked woman in the waterbed, and if you remember part 3, he's a bit of a perv. So the boobies, the titties floating around in the water, really cool. Freddy bursts out, says something about a wet dream, kills Joey. Wonderful. Kristen is then drugged by her mum to fall asleep. Well done, mum. And Freddy throws her in a fire. She passes on her ability through some sort of lightning bolt to another character called Alice, and then we get to meet the new cast. But then we get another cool kill, and there's a character called Sheila. She falls asleep at school, very easily done, and she has asthma. But Freddy says, do you want to suck face? And then sucks the air out of her, and it ultimately kills her in her dream. But in the real world, she's had an asthma attack, and the pump didn't relieve the asthma. That's smart. I like that kill. It harks back to the first and second movie where Freddy's not getting the blame for stuff. Then we get Rick's death. They must have run out of money or something because he fights an invisible Freddy. Oh. Then we get Debbie's death. This death is disgusting. Her arms break, and then these cockroach limbs pop out, and she's scared of bugs in the real world, so fair. She gets turned into a cockroach that Freddy puts into a box, like a cockroach hotel, and then squishes it. There's goo everywhere. Before that, she's like stuck in all the pest control goo, and fuck it, it's disgusting, but it's a good kill. It's kind of stomach churning, but, you know, good kill. So then Dan, who is now Alice's kind of love interest, that continue into the next movie, they go to battle Freddy, and they do it by showing Freddy his inner evil. Freddy revels in his own evil. It doesn't really land for me, but yeah, there's a really cool sequence with a loop-in dream where they don't realise they're dreaming, and after they get to the car a number of times, they're like, wait, something's wrong. That was a good element. The film looks pretty cool. Clearly there was a bigger budget. The cast is okay. To kill off the part 3 survivors so unceremoniously kind of sticks in my throat a bit. It's a watchable film. I can rewatch this one, but not too often. You know, the cast is fine. I would say the casting is fine, but the actress that plays Alice is better in the next movie, but the next movies are worse. You know what I mean? It's an okay-ish Nightmare on Elm Street film. Definitely not one of my favourites. Not something that I will rewatch time and time again with any sort of enjoyment. But on the recent rewatch, I found myself kind of enjoying it more than I remembered. So it's gone up the ranking, because I believe I ranked these movies a couple of years ago on a very different channel, and this was at the bottom with Freddys Dead and The Dream Child. So next up, all of these movies from this point on, I enjoy. I can watch with enjoyment and glee. Next up is Freddy vs. Jason. It's also part of the Friday the 13th franchise. This was teased a decade before it actually happened. Jason goes to hell right at the end of the movie. Awful movie. Freddy's glove comes out, grabs the mask, pulls it into the ground. Everyone got excited and then had to wait a decade. This movie is directed by Ronnie Yu, who also did The Bride of Chucky. I like this movie. I know some people have their issues with it. It's too cartoony, the fighting at the end. It's a bit more brutal than, the cartoony stuff that was developed in later Freddy's. Freddy's back to being a horror character in this, but he's got his one-liners. Jason is a slasher horror character in this. Freddy's done dirty in this because he doesn't get many kills, but it's smart that he doesn't get many kills because that is ultimately what causes him and Jason to collide. He uses Jason, while masquerading as his mum, to go killing kids at Springwood. So the fear comes back. People say Freddy's name and it spreads like a disease. There's this whole subplot of the town don't even say his name because they fear him so much, and it's like if it starts spreading, he'll come back, and that's Freddy's intention. It's really well done. There are some epic kills in this movie. There is a rave in a field. Jason just annihilates everything in sight. Nitpick in this movie, I would have liked to have seen Kane Hodder play Jason. A lot of us wanted Kane Hodder and Robert Englund versus as Freddy and Jason. We didn't get that, but the guy that plays Jason does a good enough job. I mean, it's a guy in a mask that doesn't speak. This film did fantastic at the box office. Critics hated it. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Now, there are things that every fan of both franchises could pick up and be like, oh, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that. But this is the best I think we could have got for two titans of 80s horror slashers to come back together in the 2000s and kick the shit out of each other. I actually like the fact that Freddy winks at the end of the movie, that Jason pretty much wins with the help of the alive teenagers. There is a scene where Freddy bursts out of water with this demon look to him. I think that look is outstanding. I wish we'd seen more than that. I have a lot of fun with this movie. There are some things that piss me off with it. The whole thing of Jason being scared of water. The guy was wet the entire time he was in Manhattan. Why is he now scared of it? Freddy being scared of fire. Freddy uses fire a lot in all of his other movies. Ronnie Yu clearly didn't watch the other films. We got Robert Englund as Freddy, we got Ken Kersinger as Jason Voorhees, we got Monica Keena as Laurie Campbell. I wonder if that's a nod to Laurie Strode and Neve Campbell. Could be. We got Jason Ritter as Will Collins, Kelly Rowland. Kelly Rowland is fucking awful in this movie. And there's a line she drops. I can't even repeat it because YouTube will just immediately take the video down. It wasn't in the script. She just thought it was a better line to deliver. It wasn't. Not at all. There's this weird Jason Mewes character that's not played by Jason Mewes, but it's clearly supposed to have been him. It still kind of works. There's this whole thing with making Jason go to sleep with drugs from the sleep center in order to... This movie's crazy, but I like it. I really enjoy it. The cast are fine. The bed folding kill is great. There's a part where Freddy comes back, thinks he's got the power, pulls out this extended giant shadow himself, swipes, and he's, not enough power. I need more kills. I need Jason to kill more. I like it. There was supposed to be a sequel to this, but it turned into a comic book, Ash versus Freddy versus Jason. I'm glad they never made that movie. I don't see how that would work. There is buckets of blood in this movie. There's a really cool scene where they do like a little homage to part 3 with veins coming out of her feet and the kind of the marionette thing all over again. There's a kid gets his back burnt. Freddy's back appears in there while he's killed in front of his friends. His face gets all slashed up. I understand why some people, fans of both franchises or fans of one or the other, don't like this movie. I do. I enjoy it. It's fun. It's one of those horror popcorn fun movies, Watch it with some friends, having a few drinks. It's a great film. Now, if you're wondering why I'm suddenly sat down and why my wall has changed behind me, I somehow completely missed A New Nightmare, or the real title, Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. And this was released in 1994, and this is a meta supernatural slasher. This was Wes Craven's return, Heather Langenkamp's return, John Saxon's return, Robert Englund's return. But There's a difference. You see, in this, Heather Langenkamp plays a version of Heather Langenkamp. Robert Englund plays a version of Robert Englund. Wes Craven plays himself. Bob Shaye plays himself. And this movie is more about the movie franchise of Freddy Krueger, or the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie, was so terrifying that people became really scared of Freddy Krueger, much like I did as a child. And a real dream demon has latched on to the persona of Freddy Krueger, and he kind of looks like him, kind of doesn't. It's still played by Robert Englund as well. And this dream demon is trying to come through to the real world via the nightmares of Heather Langenkamp and her son, played by Miko Hughes. Miko Hughes is a child actor. Child actors are very hard to get right. Miko Hughes is fantastic in Pet Sematary, and he is fantastic in this. Except for Poopy Face. We'll get to Poopy Face. This movie is dark. They take this more in the more menacing and far less comical vein of the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And this movie follows the plot of the movie industry behind horror movies. And whilst this movie didn't perform well in the cinemas, it was basically I think this was the lowest earning movie of the entire franchise. It's such a good film. This film is genuinely creepy as hell. There's just this constant, almost buzzing in the background that ramps up over time. And because you barely see Freddy in there, or this dream demon, you're constantly waiting for him to pop up, and there's some really good jump scares in this, jump scares that are earned. And it basically follows Heather Langenkamp living in Los Angeles with her son and her husband, and her son starts to have these dreams, and it's almost like Freddy's trying to possess her son Dylan, much like a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Her husband has Nancy has a nightmare about Freddy and this glove that I don't like. I don't like the glove, and I don't like the look of Freddy in this, or the dream demon. We'll get to that. She has a dream that her husband is killed, and he wakes up with a cut on his finger, and she's like, where did you get that? And it starts this whole thing off. There's a series of earthquakes, and the earthquakes play a huge part in this, like signaling the arrival of this sleep dream demon. And what I didn't realise until much later was there were some massive earthquakes in Los Angeles just after the filming of this movie. So all of the external shots you see of like collapsed bridges and damaged buildings and stuff are all real. Almost like this movie predicted the worst earthquakes to have hit Los Angeles in a long time. There's not many kills in this. In fact, 2 people that are killed off screen. They're only mentioned. But it's more about Dylan. This demon is coming after Dylan, and Dylan's pet dinosaur is a stuffed toy, protects him because of the belief system. You know, if the kid believes the dinosaur could protect him, but the dinosaur gets slashed up and then he gets restitched. There's this impending sense of doom. Heather Langenkamp slowly sort of melds into Nancy, and John Saxton slowly melds into Nancy's dad. But there's this weird undertone to the movie where you're like, who's doing the killings? It's almost a whodunit for a portion. And at one point you're like, is Wes Craven actually doing this? Is he stalking Nancy? Is he making the phone calls to Heather like Freddy Krueger would? Then there's Robert Englund. Robert Englund is off in this, and you're like, is he actually becoming possessed by this demon? And it's just really weird. And then Heather Langenkamp's husband Chase gets killed in a car accident, but we, the viewers, know that it was Freddy because the hand comes up through the seat, nicks his testy, he has a little scratch, and then you're dead. There's a funeral scene where Heather falls into the grave. In the background, Tuesday night is in the background of the funeral. There's a lot of the old cast from different movies in the background. There's an earthquake. Heather falls into the grave, and then the demon comes out to grab her. It's just really well done. But again, I don't like the look of the demon. Then they recreate the Tina death scene in a hospital, where Freddy's walking up the ceiling, dragging the babysitter up, but we can see Freddy this time on and off. And it's really well done, other than it is so brightly lit that Freddy in a bright green hat and this trench coat and leather trousers just looks off. His makeup just doesn't look right. They went for the skin is being ripped open and you can see the muscle and stuff underneath as opposed to burns. And the glove, none of it works for me image-wise. But this movie is genuinely really, really creepy. Dylan starts sleepwalking, so he has to go to the hospital. He's throwing up and stuff. He's being possessed. And there's this really cool scene where Dylan is crossing a freeway and Freddy, the demon Freddy lifts him up, carries him over the traffic, and then Heather sort of ducks under this lorry. It's done against the back screen, but it's done really well. It still holds up now. There are some bits at the end of the movie that don't hold up quite so well. And basically, she has to become Nancy, but then John Saxon actually starts to play Don Thompson, Nancy's dad, as opposed to John Saxon. Nancy drops into this hell world, and then there's this big fight, and Freddy gets pushed into a boiler. This movie, the dream demon look aside, is creepy as shit. The lighting is on point. The daytime stuff kind of looks off. There's like a haze to everything. The dark elements, the stuff filmed at night, has got this blue filter over it, which was used in the original and in The Dream Child, I believe. Englund is on point in this. It's just the makeup lets him down. When he plays himself and he comes up on this TV show waving, genuinely I found it creepy as a kid because I was that scared of Freddy. I love this movie. It's got a lot of rewatch value for me. The only thing I don't like is skin the cat, and he kills the babysitter in full light, and that's off, and then little Miko Hughes, bless him, does the poopy face. But, you know, he's a very young actor. He was good as Gage in Pet Sematary. He's great as Dylan in this. And Miko Hughes has had quite the career as a child actor. He was in Kindergarten Cop with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was in Pet Sematary as Gage Creed. He was even in Spawn and Mercury Rising. There's some pretty good films. You're a young kid and you've got to work with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis. You've been in a Spawn movie, Pet Sematary, Freddy Krueger. Fantastic. This movie used to be a lot higher up in my rankings. It used to be my second favourite, I think, but then I kind of fell in love with a movie that a lot of people don't like, and we'll get there. Some of you may be thinking, you haven't said part 2 yet. You've said you like all these movies. We're on the 3rd movie. What are you doing? I recently did a video called In Defense of Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. I like this movie. Freddy is dark, terrifying, scary, horrible. For me, the movie works. You've got a homosexual teenager who is scared of his own sexuality, and Freddy uses that as a weakness to possess him to come out into the real world. There's a lot of subtext. There's definitely not subtext, but I love this movie. But I'm not going to spend too much time on it in this video because I've done a full long-length video that I'll leave in the description down below, and you can go and check that out. Number 1 and number 2. For a lot of people, these are interchangeable. Now, I've got the part 3 glove there. Some people can swap and change. Depends which one they've watched more recently. It's more definitive for me. I love both of these movies. However, part 3 is my number 2. And there's only a few reasons why. And it's the whole wizard guy. It just took me out of the movie. It was so cheesy, it didn't really fit for the rest of the movie. However, Patricia Arquette's character in this is fantastic. She can scream. In this, we get the return of Nancy Thompson. She comes back to help these kids that are having nightmares about Freddy Krueger. She walks into a room as Patricia Arquette's character is saying, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for. She finishes the thing and is like, how do you know that? We've got this Dr. Neil Gordon. He's an interesting character, but I never bought the love angle with him and Nancy. Robert Englund is fantastic in this. We get John Saxon's return in this, and he's used to effect. You know, he's this broken, drunk man because he realises that he ruined his daughter's life in his actions to Freddy Krueger and his actions in the original movie. So he's this broken man that wants to redeem himself. We also get Larry Fishburne in this, who looks a lot like Lawrence Fishburne. It is Lawrence Fishburne back when he was going as Larry. He's so young in this, it's jarring. We get some weird things in here, like Zaza Gabor turning into Freddy Krueger. Like, I don't know why that was in there. But this movie and the effects are absolutely fantastic. Out of this world, in my opinion, the best effects in any of the Nightmare movies. So the movie opens and we've got Kristen Parker. She's making a newspaper and lollipop stick kind of dollhouse, and it is 1428 Elm Street. She's building Nancy's house. She's got music blasting because she's trying to stay awake, and then her mum, not a very good mum, mum tells her to knock the music off, go to sleep. Uh-oh, she's building the Elm Street house. Kristen goes into the Elm Street house and tries to rescue a child, showing that Kristen is a good person. I like all of this, it looks fantastic. She walks into a corridor and there's teenagers hung everywhere from nooses, and it's like, ooh, this is dark. I like it. There's a really cool scene where Kristen is trying to protect this girl and then realises she's already dead and she's a corpse when she looks down into her arms. I love that. And then she thinks she's awake. She turns on a tap. The tap turns into Freddy's glove and cuts her wrists. And her mum thinks that she has tried to take her own life and puts her in a mental asylum. This is a great story, you know, believing that her daughter is suicidal, try to get her some help. So she goes to Western Hills Psychiatric Hospital, where all hell breaks loose. This is when Nancy enters as a therapist, a sleep therapist. Makes sense given what she went through in the first movie. She's still got the grey streak. Instead of being 20 years of age now, she's 30 years of age because 10 years have passed. And obviously, Heather Langenkamp being Nancy, she's a great actress, a great final girl. And to see her coming back, it's kind of heartwarming, you know? So we told some stories then of a kid that cuts off his own eyelids to stay awake and things like that. And Nancy's like, yeah, this is Freddy. And she believes the kids, but nobody else in the hospital believes her and the kids. And we get one of the best kills of the entire franchise. There's a lot of good kills in this franchise that haven't featured yet. One of them is this kill. There's a marionette scene. There's a guy that makes puppets. So Freddy obviously uses that. One of the little marionette puppets turns into a little Freddy and then rips the veins and arteries out of this kid, marionettes him through the hospital, takes him up onto the roof. Freddy's dangling him, cuts the cords, down he falls. Whoa, what a death. The whole thing with the veins and the arteries being these strings to puppet, it's disgusting. But so well done. I adore that kill. But then these kids decide to go into the dream world to fight Freddy for killing their friends. And apart from the wizard thing, it's cool. We get some backstory from the ghost of Amanda Kruger, Freddy's mum in this. She appears as this elderly nun. There's clearly a ghost by the end of the movie, but then in later films, she's far younger, played by somebody completely... I hate the later films. There's also another very cool kill in this movie that doesn't involve the glove. It involves needles. One of the characters is a ex-drug addict, and in the dream world, Freddy makes all of her old trap marks open up, and they're like weeping and winking and sucking, and he just want to get high. In go the needles, gets her high, kills her. Great kill. The wizard gets killed by a giant wheelchair because in the real world he's paralysed from the waist down, but in the dream world he can walk and he's a magician. It's kind of a cruel kill, but it's not that great. I think there were budgetary issues at this point, but still it looks cool enough. The surviving members then go on to take on Freddy in the dream world, while John Saxon, again reprising his role as Nancy's dad, goes to a junkyard with the doctor, and they bury Freddy's bones with hallowed ground, with holy water and stuff, helping the Dream Warriors to take out Freddy, but Freddy doesn't go quietly, and he tricks Nancy and stabs her through the chest. Nancy ultimately helps destroy Freddy whilst killing herself in the process. It's a great end to a trilogy. Fantastic. We don't need any more, except Freddy vs. Jason. But we all know how that went. He got brought back by dog piss. And the whole final battle is really good. There's this room full of mirrors, bearing in mind it's the 80s, it's done so well. And then we get the Dream Warriors song at the end by Dakin. I love that song. It's something about metal. I'm a metalhead, and there is something about metal and horror that just blends perfectly. I adore this movie, but it's only beaten by one other. Part 3 also had the involvement of Wes Craven. He did come back on some sort of writing duties, but he didn't direct.
The prime time, bitch!
So we get to number 1, and the reason that this movie is number 1, before I talk about the movie itself, is this is the horror movie that traumatized me as a child. I was terrified of Fred Krueger when I was a kid. He scared the shit out of me. Parts 1 and 2, I watched them as a kid. Didn't like Freddy, couldn't look at images of him or anything. If you go and watch the Part 2 defense video, I go into much more detail about it. But yeah, I had dreams about Freddy Krueger after watching this. I was far too young. Now, the full title to this movie is Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. And then it's got this tagline: if Nancy doesn't wake up screaming, she won't wake up at all. Perfect. Sets the tone. This movie was released in 1984. There's so many elements of this movie that are just god tier. The kills, god tier. The effect of Freddy coming out over the bed, over the top of Nancy and coming back in. All practical effects. It was a latex sheet and it wasn't even Robert Englund that leaned out, but effective. you get the switch up where it looks like at the beginning of the movie Tina is going to be the final girl, and then when she is killed in one of the most fantastic kills of the franchise, in where she's getting dragged up the wall across the ceiling in front of her boyfriend who's cowering in a corner, she gets slashed, hits the bed, blood splash, dead. An iconic death scene. But it don't end there, because we as the audience are then thinking, holy shit, they've just killed off the lead. Nobody's safe. Anyone can die at any time. It's fantastic at setting that up. Then we see Nancy fall asleep at school, and then we see Tina in a body bag get dragged down the hallway, leaving a trail of blood. Another iconic scene. Nancy chases after it and gets stopped by a hall monitor. Where's your pass? Screw your hall pass. Another iconic scene, and it's obviously Freddy. She's wearing the jumper. Even the opening of this movie, it's not Robert Englund, but it's somebody playing the role of Freddy Krueger's hands, building the glove, and it's like the noises he's making, the noises of the hammer. There's some weird distortion over most of the noise in this film. Even the cars sound creepy. It's such a creepy, horrible, nasty introduction. And then you get this is the face of God, and Freddy cutting his fingers off. I mean, when you buy these NECA figures, they come with accessories. You can change the hands, you can change the heads. This came with 3 different Freddy heads. I made sure that I had the finger cut off element. But the look in Englund's face, you can only see his eyes and his mouth, really. But the way he messes with Tina, the extended arms as he's running, that's why this figure has got this head pose and the fingers being chopped off. It's just a shame these figures are not more poseable. They're kind of restrictive. And at the beginning of the video, I described where the look of Fred Krueger came from. There's something else that was brought into this movie that you're unaware of, but Freddy's jumper is not black and red like I thought as a kid. It's green and red. And that was by choice. The green and red in these horizontal stripes make you feel uncomfortable. Freddy's very poorly lit in this for great effect. The sounds of the blades scraping on pipework and everything in this movie, it's horrible. Absolutely horrible. The way Freddy Krueger or Robert Englund holds himself with the glove weighing him down and the weird motions he makes when he's moving. Just an absolutely terrifying movie. We get the boiler rooms, and we get all of these creepy, nasty imagery of the centipede coming out of Tina's dead mouth. And we also get the 3 girls doing jump rope with the 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You in this movie. We get Johnny Depp's first movie role where he plays Nancy Thompson's boyfriend Glenn. And the acting can be a bit ropey in places, but these are kids in the 80s making a low-budget horror film. I think they've done I think they did far better than people give them credit for, because horror movies are mostly just sort of brushed to one side as nonsense. And we've got this character called Rod, and Rod is a dick. But he's not so much of a dick that you can't wait for him to get killed. Most horror movie slashers, there's always that one guy and you're like, I can't wait for you to die. Rod isn't quite that bad. He starts off that bad, but then you feel quite sympathetic towards him after the death of Tina. There is an insult he throws out that just doesn't land, and up yours with a twirling lawnmower. What? And they go to a party at Tina's. Glenn, Nancy and Tina start discussing these dreams, realise they're all having the same dreams, that they're all having the same dreams about the same man, and it sets up Tina's death. Tina's death, practical effects, absolutely fantastic. Rod is the next to go, and his death isn't quite as exciting because he's hung in his cell. It's made to look like a suicide, so the parents don't realise that the kids are being hunted by Freddy Krueger and they won't be believed, which is important to the plot. And we're just in for carnage. Even though Freddy is used sparingly in this movie, he's always this presence. You're always waiting for him, and you're never quite sure who's awake and who's sleeping, and it adds to this creepy feeling, this like he's everywhere. Nancy's mum takes her to a sleep clinic. She goes to sleep, and in her dream state, she attacks Freddy, or grabs onto Freddy and brings out his hat. She got claw marks on her arm. People start to realise this Freddy thing is real. Her mum starts to realise the Freddy thing is real, but she burned him alive. That'll do it. When Nancy gets home, her mum gets drunk, as she does all the way through the movie, because she was involved in the death of Freddy Krueger. Nancy brings Glenn over. You have one job, Glenn. Don't fall asleep. Wake me up if you see me screaming or getting attacked. Glenn falls asleep. Nancy wakes up, and then there's just this amazing bit that shows Nancy with a bit of balls to her, where she's like, and you fell asleep? Slaps Glenn. I love that scene. But then we get Glenn's death. And Glenn's death, I'm sure when I watched a documentary, they used the same room and the same effect as Tina. They flipped the room for all this blood geyser to just pour out of a bed. It's such a great scene. It's a bit of an homage to The Shining. There's blood absolutely everywhere. Absolutely fantastic kill. Johnny Depp getting pulled down into the bed wearing this weird belly top. The 80s were weird. So because her boyfriend is dead, her two friends are dead, Nancy goes after Freddy into the dream world. She goes in on purpose with the intention of bringing him into the real world where he would then possibly be human. She speaks to her dad. Dad, you need to come and help me and all the rest of it. The house has been barricaded by her mum to stop Nancy getting out and to stop Glenn getting in. There's bars on the windows, so Nancy's trapped. And Nancy succeeds. She brings Freddy into the real world. At first she thinks she's failed. There's this brilliant jump scare. And then there's this chase sequence. But Nancy has home alone the house. She's Kevin McAllistered the shit out of it. Freddy takes a sledgehammer to the chest. Gets a light bulb blow up at him because it's full of shotgun powder or gunpowder. And then Nancy sets him on fire in the basement. Freddy runs upstairs to Nancy's mum. Nancy goes up after him. The stairs are melting. It's another really cool effect. In HD or 4K, you can see it's a pre-cut hole with stuff in there, whereas back in the 80s on a square TV, you didn't notice that. And Freddy dives onto her mum, sets her mum on fire, and mum gets pulled down into the bed and is dead, and you're like, holy shit. Freddy has one more go at Nancy, and Nancy just simply turns her back and says, I'm not afraid of you anymore. You have no power over me. Wait, that was Labyrinth. It was something like that. And Freddy turns into a glitter cloud, a sparkle cloud. He has no power left. Nancy has defeated him. What a fantastic ending. I love it. And then the movie continues. And when I watch this movie, that's where it ends for me. Because they filmed 3 or 4 different endings. There was Freddy driving a car. They didn't use that, thankfully. There was a bit where they just drive off, and that makes no sense because of she defeated Freddy, yes, but all of her friends are dead. They've already died in the real world, so how can they be back in this? It must be a dream. What? But instead, we get Nancy's mum is alive. Nancy gets into the car with her dead friends, and it's clearly a dream world. There's like this weird haze, and then Nancy's mum turns into a sex doll and gets pulled in through a window, and it's the worst effect you've ever seen. It looks terrible, but I adore this movie. Krueger is absolutely terrifying. England is absolutely terrifying. John Saxton is such a good actor in this. I mean, he only had a small part for a guy that has acted alongside Bruce Lee. Heather Langenkamp is fantastic. Johnny Depp is fantastic. The effects, for practical effects on a budget, they've only ever been topped by part 3. And there are even some effects in part 3 that don't work quite as well. So there you go. There is my ranking of the entire Nightmare on Elm Street film. Yes, I've quickly sort of described the movies I don't like, just to spend more time on the movies that I do like. So let me know in the comment section what your list is. Yes, I know, my list is going to be very different to yours. It's no slight on you, it's no slight on me. We can all have difference of opinions and be right in our own world. Much love to you all. Beardo out.